How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the channel. I am an avid herpetologist. Finally starting to get an office space put together here in the new place, so hopefully my backgrounds moving forward will finally have something interesting to look at. But yeah, it's been a very busy year. I hope you guys here in the US have enjoyed your Thanksgiving weekend this past week. I definitely have a lot to be thankful for this year. It has been one heck of a year so far with lots of big changes in my personal life. And 2 weeks ago, I finally achieved a goal that I had set for myself at the start of this year. It has been 2 years since I went to the last Digimon Nationals all the way out in LA, and I really wanted to try to qualify again, and it's kind of hard to do when you don't have a lot of time to attend some of the bigger events. But now that we're all settled into our new place, work has started to settle down a bit, I finally had the chance to go out and attend a store regionals about 2 weeks ago here in Tampa. And wouldn't you know it, we did in fact manage to walk away with a third place finish, a 5-1 record with our boy, Black Base Machinedramon. It is such an unbelievably good feeling to finally walk away from another big event with a good top underneath my belt with the deck that I have dedicated so much time and effort into getting so good with. Despite the fact that we are in one of the most unforgiving metas I think this game has ever seen in its history, I really like where Machinedramon is at right now. You're starting to see, like every once in a while, an occasional top up with, different lists, but I just want to say for the record, I currently, at least at the time of filming this, have not seen any other tops popping up for Black Base. I really think Black Base has a lot of things going for it in the current meta right now. I'm really happy with the way that this event turned out. Obviously, walking away with a 5-1 record is really awesome. Today what we're going to be doing is I'm going to be showing you guys the list. It is extremely similar to the deck profile that I posted not too long ago. So we're not going to be spending too much time going really into the deck list itself. Instead, what I'm going to be doing is talking about the alterations that have been made since then. If you do want to see the full, in-depth analysis of my list and kind of where my mind was at, I will link the original deck list down below so you guys can check out the deck profile. Instead, we're going to spend our time going over, like I said, the tech choices, the changes that I've made from that profile. Once I have gone through the deck list a bit, I'm going to take some time at the end of the video to go through all of my matchups, which you can go ahead and see right here. I want to talk about how each of them went, kind of how I feel the deck as a whole matches up into the general meta, and what I think some of the strengths and weaknesses are. Obviously, Machinedramon is a deck that is still very much flying under a lot of people's radar. It is not really considered to be a top-tier deck. Quite frankly, that's where I want to be. I don't want people taking this deck seriously. I don't want people even considering that this deck can appear at the upper tables. That way I get the home field advantage when I sit down across from them. I may know what they're doing, they may not know what I'm doing. Anyways, with the preamble out of the way, guys, let me go ahead and show you my list, and let's talk about it for a bit. Okay, here we are. So, as I mentioned, this is an extremely similar list to the one that I posted about a month ago. A lot of the cards are still very much the same, but I did make a couple of adjustments to try to smooth out the deck a little bit and work out some of the kinks. So this is a build that I've mentioned before, is very option card heavy. I've included some copies of trainings to help smooth out our draws, give us some extra dig tools, since we are no longer playing Ukomon, and instead are opting for copies of the brand new CS Machinedramon. This card is proving itself to be extremely valuable, not only to help load up our trash early, but of course give us extra draws and memory efficiency as well. This card is really cool. But with that being said, you may notice I have now cut my rookie total from 7 down to 6 by taking away one of the Machinedramons. Now during testing, I did play around with cutting one of the Hagurumon, having only 2 copies of Haguru and 4 copies of Mono. Ultimately, I didn't really like how that felt, to be completely honest. I was coming across a couple of different issues. First and foremost, we need to be seeing machine and cyborg bodies, whether that be for things to discard to attack with heavy mobile, bodies that we want to grab and trash off Supreme Connection, making sure that we are seeing at least 2 anytime we activate it. There were a couple of different reasons that I chose to cut one of the Machinedramons instead of one of the Haguru. Ultimately, I think having the 3-3 split has felt a lot better, and while I will say that I was kind of hesitant to cut down to only 6 rookies, honestly, it really hasn't felt that bad. Having only the 6 and having a 3-3 split has felt just about right. It really has kind of helped smooth things out a little bit. The rookies are just not vital to this list. They're just not. They're setup pieces. Because of that, and having so many other plays that we can make without seeing our rookies early on, having only 6 is honestly fine. I can usually get away most games with just seeing 1 or 2 copies of my rookies, if even that. It really doesn't affect the way I play all that much. With that being said, another one of the changes that I made was bringing back in copies of Promo Raremon. I've been up and down on this card ever since it's been released. It's kind of floated in and out of my various lists over the different formats. Currently, it's back in. I do think that this card brings a lot to the table, a lot of things that I may have neglected to really take into consideration, but at the same time, obviously with space being so tight, you have to kind of make concessions if you want to find room for this guy. Ultimately, though, I think having the 2 copies just as an option when I see it has been really, really nice. Not only does this, of course, have the ability to Digivolve over our rookies, giving us a little extra dig power, being able to Digivolve also means that we can establish stacks either in our racing area or threaten to build up stacks out on the field and kind of force our opponents to respond to them, which, if you've seen any of my deck profiles or watched any of my gameplay, you know that I'm kind of big on forcing my opponent into responding to what I'm doing first. I ideally want to be making plays that are not committing a ton of resources to the board and forcing our opponent to kind of proactively respond while holding back my ultimate plays, which is obviously usually going to be the Machinedramons, not having to commit them and kind of, you know, forcing the interaction early. Having the 2 copies of Raremon is also really nice when I'm playing memory-efficient options. Now, I did cut my 4 copies of Defense Training down to only 2, with one of them being moved into a black memory boost, and I'll talk about that in just a second. Obviously, where these 2 Raremon are coming from is one of those rookies and one of these memory options. Again, just kind of splitting between those and just having the champion to be an option has proven really nice, especially when you are playing cards like Trainings, where you can Digivolve into Raremon for cheaper, or Digimon onto Raremon for cheaper. Ultimately, this has proven to be a really solid card that helps to kind of tie together some of the more loose ends that I feel like the deck has had as I've been playtesting. Another really important thing that this card has going for it is it doesn't need a machine or cyborg to discard. So if I'm in a situation where I'm like flooding on tamers, flooding on options, I can always just pitch one of those to try to draw up more cards instead of requiring, you know, attacks on my machines or cyborgs, which I may need to hold on to if I don't want to discard one to, like, say, Attack of the Heavy Mobile. Even that little niche interaction does go a long way. Additionally, since I am playing a champion in the deck, it also means that I can now play my copy of Rise Greymon as my extra security check inherit, with the ability to now play Tamers out if that interaction comes up, and every once in a while it does, which again can be done cheaper thanks to our trainings. In general, I do think Raremon and the defense trainings have worked out really, really well. I really like how they function in the deck, and since the BT7 Metal Greymon is my only red card in the entire deck, really the trainings are never missing. It's always going to hit something of reasonably high value more often than not. With that being said, as I said, I did cut not just the 1 copy of my training for a Raremon, I cut a 2nd copy of training to include a single copy of Black Memory Boost. During playtesting, it was pointed out just how many very specific pieces that this version of the deck needs if I really want to pull off a big combo turn. What that means is I sometimes need to be digging deeper than just 2 cards off of a training, but at the same time, I don't want to have to potentially be bottom decking my Attack of the Heavy Mobile Digimon. So having my 1 memory boost and 2 copies of training, it's still consistency options, but sometimes I just need to dig a little bit deeper. Other times I'm looking for very specific cards that are not Digimon, and I may need to have a training, so I'm not potentially bottom decking those cards. So I went with this split. I'm generally not a huge fan of using consistency cards in these kind of thin ratios of 1 and 2 per, but honestly, this has felt really good so far, and I've also said this before, but having a generic gain 2 memory can honestly be a lot more helpful sometimes than Digivolving for 2 cheaper. Sometimes that can be the difference between being able to hard play machine without passing turn, or having to pass turn and just get a single blitz attack, which obviously is not ideal. Ultimately, though, I really do like these consistency options in the deck. Ultimately, I think they help to smooth out the draws in a way the deck honestly really needs. So having the 3 copies of those consistency options on top of the Supreme Connections, the Rookies, and the Raremons, it's a pretty solid consistency package. So that about does it for those. Alright, the only other big change that was made was to my Cyborg lineup. I actually wound up cutting Cyberdramon Ace in favor of the 2nd copy of Oblivion. Now, I mentioned in my deck profile that I was kind of toying with the idea of bumping Oblivion up, but wasn't super confident that it was going to be important enough. I think it's safe to say that this card is definitely important enough. So, the more that I playtested, the more you kind of come to realize that whether they are relying on blockers or not, just about every one of the top decks in the meta has blockers in some capacity, or at least the ability to create them. First and foremost, of course, we have the top deck of the format, Hudi, which does have the ability to create blockers thanks to Ankylomon. We obviously have Royal Knights, which has way more blockers than I first thought. Not only do they have the new Craniumon, they have Jesmon tokens alongside, of course, Omnimon X Antibody himself. And then, of course, there's the biggest elephant in the room, and honestly the card you need Oblivion for more than any other matchup, and that is the omnipresent Jesmon/Genkumon Turtle deck. Now, I don't know how things are in your personal locals, but around our area, Jesmon Genku is omnipresent. This deck is everywhere. Now, it may not be necessarily translating into top cuts, but this is a deck that you have to be prepared for if you want to do well in events. Jesmon was my only loss of the day at the regionals, and one of the things people have been asking is whether or not I think the matchup is unwinnable. The answer is no. I don't think it's unwinnable, but there is a lot of luck involved, and I will get a little bit more into that once I start talking about the matchups, but you really do need Oblivion if you want even a snowball's chance in the Jesmon matchup. So I did bump this card up to 2 copies. I do think that this is worth playing in the current meta. Basically, all of the top decks, as I mentioned, have at least some manner of attack redirection. So having this access to this card as consistently as possible, it really is important. So I personally recommend playing the 2 copies. And honestly, as much as I do like Cyberdramon Ace, it just doesn't feel like it does enough in the current meta. I thought it was going to, and it turns out a lot of the top decks just either have immunity or don't care about Digivolve. Specifically, all of the ones that I just mentioned. Hudi, Royal Knights, and Jesmon are either immune to it or just don't care. And arguably, those are the 3 top decks right now. So, Cyberdramon Ace is back out for the time being. That is absolutely a card that is probably going to come back in the future, but for the time being, I did not feel like it did enough. But if you want an example of a card that I definitely think has been overperforming, it has to be Cyberdramon X Antibody. This is my favorite tech card in Machinedramon right now. This card is so strong, and I feel like it really has shown its value every single game that I have seen it. Basically, as long as you are playing this card, if you can get your opponent down to a single security, they are no longer safe for the rest of the game. There is always potential that we can blitz in a machine, trash that last security, and push that last attack through at a moment's notice, regardless of where our memory is at. That is a big deal, and it really does help to close out games that may not have been winnable otherwise. In fact, I won a few of my games at the regionals with this interaction. I really do think that this card is just phenomenal, and quite honestly, we are also in a format right now where security trashing really does help a lot more than security checks sometimes. There's a lot of security bombs being teched in decks like, again, Royal Knights and Hudi, honestly, with the control variants that can be playing the CS option cards. Being able to trash our opponent's security and help guarantee that our checks are going to be just a little more safe, it goes a long way, and it can really help push through that last little bit of aggression that we need. So having that 1 additional aggressive inherit on top of our 3 extra security checks, just right. And the fact that we can just slam down a fresh delay option and blitz a machine and trash that fresh one before the delay would ever even be usable, perfect. It really is great. With that being said, if you are going to try out a copy of Cyberdramon X Antibody in your list, make sure you are playing no less than, I was going to say 6, but honestly, I wouldn't go lower than 7. Keep in mind that if you're going to be trashing an option card to trash an opponent's security, it implies that you either have an extra option card in the battle area or have resources enough that you don't need to use the delay option, and there will be games where that is not the case. You want to make sure that you have plentiful numbers of these delay options, ideally multiple copies of Supreme Connection, since you're probably not going to use more than one of those in a turn anyways, but like I said, just make sure that if you're going to be playing Cyberdramon X Antibody, have enough delay options that you will be able to afford to trash one of those delay options without actually having to use the value it would otherwise provide. That's pretty much it. But if you do try a list out like this, I highly recommend giving X Antibody a try. Like I said, this card is overperformed in my opinion. Definitely worth, at the very least, a try. That's pretty much it. Everything else about the list is pretty standard. This is an OTK variant that is aiming to get big combo turns with Megadramon Unsuspends and extra security checks, ends the game practically out of nowhere, and has a lot of branching game plans now that we have all of these extra memory options, the ability to drop our cyborgs for super cheap to interact with the board, and honestly, one of the biggest hurdles for learning this deck, if this is a deck that you want to pick up, I've said it 100 times on this channel, this is a deck you need to take the time to practice with. It is very difficult to get good with, but if you are willing to be patient and put in the time, this is a deck that will pay its ends back. This deck has a very good ceiling. It is very skill intensive. All of your cards are basically Swiss Army knives with multiple uses, and remembering all of those uses and the different interactions you can create, that is a big part of what it takes to get truly good with Machinedramon. Anyways, with that out of the way, we can go ahead and leave the deck list behind. I'm sure a lot of you guys probably clicked on the video wanting to hear about the matchups and how the deck plays into certain meta decks, so let's go ahead and transition there, and I'll let you guys know my thoughts. It just so happens that at this event, I got to play against all three of the big meta contenders right now with Royal Knights, Jesmon, and Hudi, and I have quite a few thoughts on all three of these matchups. But both the beginning of the tournament and the end of the tournament were bookended with matchups against Royal Knights. Now, this deck is kind of a boogeyman in the Digimon community. Obviously, these Mega Zeus style decks are very difficult to interact with, and they're kind of tricky to actually shut down effectively. While certain cards like the Rookie Floodgates that prevent reduction of play cost do help temporarily, the deck now has quite a few ways to get around them, and nothing is really a one-size-fits-all as far as how to properly answer the deck. Especially with a lot of the new tools the deck has access to, such as Magnamon, Craniamon, and Examon, which gives the deck not only additional protections, but helps to stall the game out a little bit and make it harder for you to interact to slow down their primary game plan. With that being said, despite how pretty rough the Royal Knights matchup used to be for Machinedramon, I actually think this is one of the better matchups Machine has, or at least my version of Machinedramon. Now, if you're playing something like the DM version of Machinedramon that's seeking to control the game state with cards like Veidamon, you may have a little bit of a harder time in the matchup because Veidamon really doesn't do anything into Royal Knights. However, if you're playing to either purple or black base, you basically have several free turns worth of digging while your opponent is working on setting up. Ultimately, while there are a few cards that can help speed up the game plan and tuck some extra sources, by and large, Royal Knights needs at least a couple of turns to play down some Megas and let them be slurped up by Yggdrasil before they're able to push forth their really big combo. Now, this is obviously not a hard set rule, since plenty of control cards such as Medieval Gallantmon and explosive combo potential such as an Omnimonix antibody backed up by a Gallantmon Crimson mode can end the game rather quickly. But in the case of Machinedramon, we have tools to deal with a lot of these interactions on their own, especially since the deck does play quite a few expensive aces. Cards like Metal Mamemon are phenomenal for this matchup, so making sure you hold onto these is going to be vital. Now, the first round that I played against Royal Knights, I lost game 1 because, just quite frankly, I didn't see Machinedramon. We dug down to our bottom 20. All of 4 of my machines were in the bottom 15. There just isn't anything we can do about that. Like, it just kind of is what it is. But generally speaking, the way you want to play the Royal Knights matchup, you want to basically slow roll. You want to try to establish lots of option cards and do your best to try to out as many of the Mega Bodies as you can. Metal Mamemon is great for this, but cards like Magnamon that prevent bottom decking can also be outed by cards such as your Metal Greymons, your Alteris modes. We have other ways of dealing with them. So holding onto those cards and making sure that you can even just remove 1 or 2 of them to slow them down by a turn or 2 makes a big difference. A lot of Royal Knights' biggest responses are, of course, going to be cards like Alphamon Oryuken and Omnimonix Antibody, the first of which is going to be just generally slammed on their turn to out sticky bodies, so be sure not to commit Machinedramon if you are not ready to win yet, as long as you can afford to, because they will generally out it with the Alphamon Oryuken. But on the other hand, cards like Omnimonix Antibody, which would potentially be a death sentence for some decks, are not necessarily the biggest deal, since we not only have the ability to gain immunity to bottom decking through EX8 Metal Tyrannomon, also coming with the ability to potentially suspend down blockers. We also have our Oblivion to make sure that any newly established Omnimons are not going to be able to block us if they come in off of an Omekamon trigger. In general, it's one of those things where, like, you want to take the time to make sure you see enough of your value inherits, and we do have the time to stall those turns out, since Royal Knights, like I said, a lot of the time, but not always, is dependent on taking at least a first couple of turns to get bodies out and allow them to be slurped up. If you can at least deny a few of those, you slow down the game plan quite a bit. So just something to bear in mind. Like I mentioned, Oblivion is a big card in this matchup to help make sure that they cannot establish any blockers. And honestly, one of the reasons I stopped playing the all turns plus 2k buffs like Daipen and Jet Sylphie is because having the plus 4k on your turn against matchups like Royal Knights is really, really important. Obviously, there are still bodies that are going to be at that 16k threshold, such as the aforementioned Omni X, which is omnipresent in the deck, of course, but being able to swing comfortably over everything else and honestly getting above 14, at the very least make sure that we can clear the actual Royal Knights version of Omnimon safely, just make sure that you can get through as many of those safe checks as possible so you can establish or unsuspend with Megadramon when possible. If you're able to stall long enough where you can have multiple copies of Megadramon showing and you don't have to worry about like positioning the Mega just right to get stripped out and then reattached, that's going to be most ideal. But all in all, I actually think the Royal Knights matchup is pretty favorable for Machinedramon at this point. You just kind of have to know how to navigate it and what pitfalls to not fall into. Now, round 2 was against Creepymon Mill, and from the very first moments of my opponent seeing what I was playing, we had this moment of understanding where we kind of knew where this was going to go. Obviously, Creepymon, as long as you get the right hand, can very rapidly turbo through your opponent's deck. Major props to the guy, honestly. The deck was way faster than I expected it to be. I think he wound up finishing 3-3. If you're watching this, props to you. I really thought that was a cool deck, and I was really glad to see it. But yeah, when you're talking about a deck like Machinedramon, as long as I have my copy of Machinedramon and Attack of the Heavy Mobile, I'm just going to let you mill me. I'm going to let you put as much of my resources in the trash as possible, and I'm going to do my explosive OTK when the turn's ready for it. So, yeah, unfortunately, I think both of us knew that this matchup was not going to go too well for the mill player. It basically just enables Machinedramon way too fast. So, not unfortunately a great situation there, but it is what it is. All right, round 3. We have Jesmon Genku. So, this is the matchup that is, in my opinion, the hardest for Machinedramon. Not even necessarily because it's unwinnable, but because it's almost more consistently more aggressive than even top decks like Hudiemon are. Whether that's going to be every game or whether I just got high rolled, I honestly couldn't tell you. Both of the games went exactly the same. On turn 2, they promote Bao Huck. Bao Huck effect lets you play out the Genku for 6. Genku effect, Digivolve into Savior. Suspend the Genku, go into Jesmon. Jesmon effect, play out Sistermon Blanc. Swing with Jesmon. Jesmon effect, play the token, suspend both. Effect of Blanc, Digivolve the Genku into Genku X. Now they have 4 bodies, all with Reboot Blocker and full immunity, and they are getting 3 basically invincible security checks. So here's the thing. Jesmon is not a single turn kill deck. It is very consistently a 2-turn kill deck. They double tap you. They're probably going to be doing 3 checks on turn 2, turn 3 at the latest. They're going to be setting up their massive field of immune blockers, and basically you either kill them that turn or you're going to lose. Those are pretty much the options. Now, can Machinedramon set up fast enough to win through this? Yes, it can, but there's a couple of things here. So first and foremost, like I mentioned earlier, there's a big element of luck here. Basically, if they hit high value cards in those 3 security checks that are almost guaranteed, because that's what Jesmon does, there is a possibility that you are going to be able to drop your combo and kill them through the unblockable bodies. You need to see Oblivimon. You need to see your combo pieces like Megadramon and your extra checks. You need a lot. Ultimately, you're probably going to need, for instance, your Supreme Connection set up. So like there's a lot. There's a big luck factor involved here, just based off of how consistently they can push up. As long as they have all of those pieces, they can threaten a lot on turn 2. With that being said, if they are missing any of those pieces, if they're missing the Jesmon, if they're missing the Genku or the Genku X, if they cannot fully establish both of the Megas on that first turn, there is still potential Machine can do something here. Because if they miss the Jesmon, they're probably not going to be able to aggress you into a 2-turn kill. And if they're missing the Genku, you still have the ability to respond on Crackback and hopefully respond to the board and get it dismantled at least enough that you can hopefully stall out and get your combo off. It's not easy. Like I said, there are a lot of things that kind of need to go in your favor. But as far as you as the pilot go, basically if you are playing the Jesmon matchup, you need to play under the assumption that, number 1, you are going to get 3 security checks. So expect that you will have at least 1 or 2 cyborgs that hopefully get checked and sent to your trash. Hope that maybe you see some memory resources like Supreme Connection or a Tamer. But basically, you want to try to be setting up so that if you can get ideally minimal value out of security, you can still try to push something if they don't kill you that turn, which a lot of the time they're not going to. That's pretty much the best advice I can give. Like I said, I don't think it is unwinnable. Basically, as the Machinedramon pilot, you just need to try to set up knowing that they're going to be at minimum 3 checks that are going to happen. Try to put yourself in a position where good resources will let you combo on the crackback turn. That's pretty much it. But yeah, Jesmon was my only loss at the regional. It is what it is. I've had a lot of practice against it. Sometimes I win, sometimes I lose. We crapped out pretty bad at regionals, but hey, you know, can't win them all. Round 4. Now, round 4 was up against Growlmon birds. Basically, the Growlmon engine on the bottom end with some birds and some war Growlmons in the level 5 slots. The top end was a really interesting brew. It had Phoenixmon X Antibody, which, in case you didn't know, is an absolutely bonkers card. Card is absolutely incredible. But it also combined that with copies of Oblivion, the Chronicle Oblivion, which can be cheated in off of the Phoenixmon X Antibody, which can then DNA into Alphamon or you can for a terrifying combo turn. Now, both of these games were extremely close, and by my own admission, I got very lucky game 2. They had the full combo established with Phoenixmon X Antibody, were able to blitz in, potentially going to be gaining all the memory to keep the turn, cheated in the Oblivion, but on the very first check, happened to hit Chaosdramon X Antibody. And without any DP buffs, the Phoenixmon stack died, was still able to play some things out, but unfortunately, without having that second level 6, they just did not have the resources to fully combo me out. They were not able to kill me and ultimately died on the crackback the following turn. But honestly, I have a lot of respect for Growlmon birds. I think that deck is really, really scary. Honestly, depending on the version that you're facing, the deck has a lot of different combos it can hit you with. All of them scary for their own reasons. But yeah, that was definitely a matchup that made me sweat quite a bit, but we did manage to pull out the 2-0 there. But honestly, not too much to talk about as far as how you pilot Machine into it. It's pretty standard, just like every other OTK deck. You want to try to control their board as much as possible, do your digging, get to your OTK, and just outpace the other person. That's pretty much it. Then we have round 5, which is the match that I'm sure most of you guys want to hear about, and that was Hudiemon Loop. Hudiemon is definitely the boogeyman right now. That is a very powerful, very consistent OTK strategy. With that being said, and I want to be very clear, I'm not trying in any way to like downplay how obscene that deck is, because it is strong, like strong. But I have said for a while that even though the deck is crazy, it needs a lot of pieces before it can combo off, just like Machinedramon. Not only does it have to see one of its 4 copies of Huddy, it needs to see one of its yellow tamers, it needs to see multiple other level 4s that can be brought in order to DNA with, it needs multiple of those DNA bodies so it can actually continue the loop and continue pushing aggression, and it's going to need the memory resources to get into Huddy without passing the turn. If any of these pieces are missing, the combo will do a lot of damage and then fizzle out. And that happened during one of the games that I won at the regional. With that being said, of course, there's also going to be games where Huddy just opens the nuts hand and they're going to combo kill you and there's not a whole lot more you can do about it. But honestly, the more that I've practiced this matchup, the more I genuinely enjoy it. This is a very high skill matchup where both players are kind of on the edge of their seats, sweating and just playing this constant game of chicken from one game to the next. Do you chip at the security early, or is that going to be too risky because you could give them resources that push them closer to their OTK combo? Both Machine and Hudi Loop are OTK strategies, and yes, Machinedramon can very much race Hudiemon in that regard. Hudiemon has these big combo turns, but unlike Jesmon, they're not consistently like doing 3 checks on turn 2. A lot of the time it takes them a couple of turns to set up their resources. Now, is this true of every game? No, it's not true of every game, but it is common enough that, yes, this is a deck that it's not just going to instant win as soon as they flip over the egg and Digivolve. You know, there is actually things you need to take into consideration in this matchup. Honestly, one of the best ways for the Machinedramon player to approach the Hudi matchup is to try and establish a body early on, like a level 5, as quickly as you can. The reason you establish it quickly is because, like I said, obviously the Hudi player is going to be digging and needing to find other resources. If you can establish a body that applies that pressure and potentially threatens game, like establishing, for instance, a Machinedramon or one of your security checks that does very much potentially threaten lethal very quickly, you can kind of force them to react to that, and they may have to push out before they're ready, which again can result in doing some damage to you before actually killing you. And that's the position you want to be in this particular setup. Basically, as long as you can establish that level 5 early on, you're kind of putting your opponent in a lose-lose situation unless they are able to hit all of their combo pieces super early on. Because otherwise, they have to leave the level 5 where it is and completely disregard it, potentially opening up to Digivolving into Machinedramon and comboing off. But if they do respond to it and they cannot kill you, by outing that, they've also now put potentially themselves further behind in resources. This isn't always the case, of course. There's always that possibility that they may just pick the body up and set something back in raising, which is not ideal by any means. But like I said, ultimately, this is a game of chicken. You want to force your opponent to have to make the first responsive play and be aggressive, while you can just keep setting up little bits here and there and continuing to dig for your ultimate pieces. But the number one thing to remember is do not commit Machinedramon if you are not ready to do the combo kill. Hudiemon is able to out Machinedramon pretty easily. Don't give them that opportunity. Hold Machinedramon back, set up a body, and try as much as you can to not chip too much security before you absolutely have to. If you need to do like one chip early on to try to get them to 4 to make it a little easier for your combo kill and maybe take a little bit of that pressure off so you don't need quite as many perfect pieces, obviously go for that, but just bear in mind that Hudi plays a lot of tamers, and you do not want to see any of those tamers out of security. That can be absolutely disastrous. But my Hudi player opponent played very, very well. It was a very close 3 games. All 3 of them were nail biters. Like I said, I really enjoy playing the Hudi and Machinedramon matchup. It's just, it gets your blood pumping, it gets your heart pumping. It's so much fun. I really enjoy it. Round 6, as I mentioned, we bookended the event the same way we started it. We had another Royal Knights matchup, and honestly, I have never been more relieved to see somebody flip over in Yggdrasil. Both of these games were close, but I did pull out the 2-0 in that final round, and this was one of the games where Cyberdramonix Antibody definitely came in clutch. There was a turn where I had ultimately comboed my opponent down to 0 security. With that, they were getting to a point where they were getting pretty close to combo killing, but not quite there yet. I was able to choke them pretty efficiently. They tried to stall one additional turn with Chronicle Alphamon by recovering 1 and presenting that annoying body. But that's what we have Cyberdramonix for, baby! I started the turn having a Chaos Dramonix Antibody in play. It went ahead and scooped up that Cyberdramon X. We activated Supreme Connection from our hand since we were at 3 memory, finding a copy of Metal Mamemon, swinging with Chaos Dramonix Antibody to activate the Machinedramon when attacking, tucking the Metal Mame in order to bottom deck the Alphamon, trashing the Supreme Connection we just played to remove that last security, and securing a guaranteed win against Royal Knights in that final round. What a awesome way to cap off that event. Had a lot of fun. Major congrats to my buddy Silvermoon for winning the entire event with his awesome Machinedramon deck, and genuinely a big thank you, since he's also one of the people who helped me not only playtest a ton, but very much also helped me with a lot of my ratio tweaking as well. He was the one that suggested my 3-3 ratio split for my rookies, which really helped out quite a bit. I also want to say a big thank you to Helmet, who helped me with practicing quite a bit into the Hudi matchup. If it were not for you, I would not have known quite as many of the interactions necessary to get the Hudi matchup down consistently. Granted, he absolutely demolished me on a lot of our playtesting, but it was still experience that really did pay off in the long run and helped me to understand how to properly navigate that match. So thank you to you guys. Thank you all to my subs for sticking with me over the years. We are officially going to Nationals again. I'm going to be doing my best to attend Nationals. I'm really, really excited to see what new stuff we have between now and Nats. Nats is going to be in February of next year. Who knows what kind of stuff is going to get spoiled between now and then. We may have Full Metal Empire by that time. So we're just going to have to cross our fingers. We'll see what Machinedramon looks like. But you have to know that I'm absolutely taking my boy to Nationals with me as well. This deck has been with me since day 1 on this channel, and it will absolutely be by my side when I compete at the national level for the 2nd time. So I want to say a big thank you to you guys. I hope you have enjoyed the video. If you did, of course, feel free to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Comment down below any commentary you have on my particular deck list or questions that you may have. With that, I have been an avid herpetologist. I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day, and I will see you all next time.